Good morning. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. Today, I'm going to be talking about making Business Central your own. And what does that mean? I'm going to be showing everybody how to do some high-level personalizations and do a little bit of filtering and saving those views to hopefully bring some of your day-to-day tasks that you do more to your forefront and front-facing, and maybe eliminate some of the repetitive filters that you may be putting in NAV on a regular basis. A lot of people have been hearing about Microsoft Dynamics and 365 Business Central for quite some time now. I just want to make perfectly clear that what I'm going to be presenting today is what's called the on-prem version. And just to show you what the latest version looks like, the client looks very much similar to what you're used to seeing, and you can see up here it's starting to be tagged with the Dynamics 365 Business Central, even the desktop client that you're seeing. I also want to drag over here. I have to refresh my web version of it, which is becoming a little bit more prevalent and which you're also going to start seeing. And the reason why I want to point this out is because if you were to migrate or upgrade to the current on-prem version, and if you did upgrade, that's what we would bring you to now, is there are some similarities here. So we're going to be talking about personalizing the navigation pane and the ribbon, and you can see the look and feel of the web client is quite a bit different, but there are some similarities, and what you're going to be doing on your desktop client is in fact going to be affecting what you see on your web client. So on your navigation pane on the left-hand side here, you can see all these options: journal, fixed asset, cash flow, cost accounting. You see those over at the top here. It's kind of like changing a view and changing your mindset a little bit where you're going to find things. Up here in this area, the page list, that still exists, and you can see that here. As we change these lists on the different menu items, you know, your lists, anything you change on the navigating is going to be reflected up here, and you can see there's also similarities here. It might not be that evident, but if I look under my actions, calculate and post tax settlement, post inventory, all of this interstate, that matches what's on the ribbon up here. All of this actually seems like a lot compared to what you see on this ribbon, but if I were to select my report tab, which is going to make that screen go away, you can see from this point down and on these other columns here, you can see these same reports up here. So when we get to talking about changing the ribbon, I just specifically want to point out all of this information over here, because after I make a bunch of changes, I'm going to bring this web view back over here, and I'm going to refresh the page so that you could see whatever changes I make to the navigation pane here and on the ribbon will be reflected in my web view. So without further ado, at a high level, first I'm going to be going through personalizing, then we're going to be talking about filtering and saving views. The first portion of personalization that we're going to be talking about is the navigation pane. The navigation pane is the left-hand side of your desktop that shows up. It's this whole entire area, just not different sections of it. This section right here is an area that's called page links, and the section down here are called activity buttons. The activity buttons are generally high-level module areas, you know, so like, for instance, fixed assets, I would consider that like a different module. Cost accounting is a separate module, and cash management might be considered a different module. And then there's other groupings with similar lists that will appear underneath there, and when you select each one of these activity buttons, your list up here, the respective list will change. And what do I mean by a list is the chart of accounts you see over in the middle here, that's an example of a list. If I were to hit vendors over here on the left-hand side, I would get a vendor list. So everything that is up here essentially has to be a list. We'll get into talking about the components and the significance of what they call things on the ribbon a little bit later. So in order to do any personalizations, and I'm going to try to use the word personalization as much as possible, even though when we go to make these changes, what you're going to be seeing here is called customize. The reason why I like to make the distinction between personalizing and customizing is because anything that you see me doing today are things that you will also be able to do. And the personalizations that you do are going to be only changes that you will see. If there's someone else that uses NAV and wants to make a similar change, they would have to walk through the same exact steps that you do. And every time you log out of NAV and go back in, those changes should be saved. A customization to me is something where we would make a change to a report or add a new report or new functionality, and we would add it to your ribbon or add it to your menu. It's done on the back end, and it requires the assistance of your NAV consultant or a VAR. So even though it says customization here, I'm going to try to, as much as possible, call it a personalization. So to personalize your navigation pane, one way you can get to that is by hitting what's called the NAV application menu, and that is the dark blue arrow. That's in the corner of just about every page, whether it's a list page or a card page, etc. You would go to select customize your navigation pane, and then this little box will open up. The items that you see over on the left-hand side should match the activity areas that you see in the bottom of your navigation pane. If you were to select any one of those activity pages, you would see all of the list pages that reside underneath of it. In this particular example, and what I'm going to be showing is I'm going to be adding more items to my home page because I want as much as possible to reside on my home page so I can minimize the amount of times that I have to click around during the course of the day. I want stuff more front facing. So in this example, I would take posted purchase invoices and I would copy it to my home page. Oftentimes when you're making these types of changes, once you hit OK and hit the OK here, you're going to get this little prompt to do a restart that just takes like a fraction of a second, and basically your NAV desktop is going to close for a second and then refresh, and then any change that you made, you'll see pretty much automatically. Another way you can add stuff to your home navigation pane or any of the navigation panes is you can do a search on it. So for instance, if one of your lower level activity panes did not include posted documents, if your profile did not include that, but you knew where to find or you didn't know where to find, you can do a search on posted purchase invoices, and then you would want to make sure that you select on the drop-down list when you're doing your search the menu that is going to lead you to the department path. Once you get to this history or this department path here and see the list of options you have here, I'm going to find posted purchase invoices, right click on it, and then I want to add it to my navigation pane, and you should get a very similar restart message to refresh and restart your NAV application altogether. You'll see it there. Another way to manage, or another shortcut to change and manage your navigation pane, is you can just come down to this activity area, right click on navigation pane, and you'll get that same window that you see here. And then this is a little bit of a better view. You can move these around. If you don't use cost accounting, if you don't use cash flows, you can move those off. You can change the order of these and delete any of the lower level lists. So on that note, let's go in and do a couple of these personalizations that we were talking about. So the first one I'm going to show is, so right now I'm going to add posted sales invoices and purchase invoices to my list here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate the first way I did a personalization. I'm going to go to customize my navigation pane. I happen to know under posted documents, I can see my posted sales invoices. Now I want to copy it to my home page. I'm going to hit OK again, and that's where I get this little restart message. So I'm going to hit yes. It's going to do a quick restart, and then now here's my posted sales invoice list right here. So now I can click it, and it's a list page. So that's why it goes directly to my home role center. I'm going to hit Shift F12 and go back to my main page. Now I want to add my list of unposted purchase invoices. So I'm simply going to start a search of purchase invoices. And let me see if I can make this list a little bit bigger. And I want to make sure I navigate to some sort of a menu path and not back to my posted documents list here, because you can't add that from here. I have to go to some sort of a department menu, find my purchase invoices, right click on it, and then I'm going to add it to my navigation pane. Get that same little restart message, hit yes. It's going to do a quick refresh. And then here's purchase invoices. And it's kind of nice that it organizes it right in underneath my vendors. There's some logic there. I kind of like that. One thing I do want to point out is if you go to your NAV application menu, if I go to customize, depending upon where you are on the list, a little bit different in different places, and these are going to be the options that are available in each one of those different places as well. So if I go to posted, my journals list, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, see, this does look a little bit different. You have different options here. And then if I go to departments, I do want to point out that this is probably an area where you have the least amount of flexibility to do any personalizations. Because adding stuff to departments, this really is all done on the back end. And this is where you would likely have your NAV reseller make any permanent changes here for you. But if there's new functionality that we add, we generally, Intelice, if we are your reseller, we would put it at the departments menu and also put some sort of a change or a customization on a ribbon where it's a little bit more front-facing and is available for users to find on a daily basis. All right, now I want to talk about personalizing your ribbon. First, going to talk a little bit about the structure of your ribbon and just a little bit of terminology. So just about on any one of your lists, there's the ribbon, and it has a very, very similar tab structure: home, actions, navigate, and report. So the first highest element is your tab on your, and those are the four most common ones you'll find. The home tab, someone at Microsoft has decided what the most used tasks, reports, and related information is, and they generally put those on the home tab. I have found with every version of NAV that comes out, almost every single one of these tabs change. They're very manageable, and that could be, we're going to get into a little bit more detail on how to manage each one of these. Actions are generally tasks and functions that you would do. Navigate is related information. So if I'm on a customer list and I go to navigate, I'm going to be able to see ledger entries for that customer. I'm going to be able to see maybe specific price changes or price levels for different items, banking information for that customer. And then reports are also relative to the functional area that you're on. So if I'm on a customer list, my reports are going to be sales and receivables. If I'm on a vendor list, they're going to be purchase and payable related. On each one of the different tabs, there's groups here, and that's going to be relevant when we start going into showing you how to manage and personalize your ribbon. And then this gets a little bit confusing too, because there's an action tab, but then each one of the items that you see on a ribbon is what they call actions as well. So in personalizing your ribbon, there's a couple different ways to get there to do that task as well. So when on a list or on a page, you can always go to your NAV application menu, which is that little dark blue box that's in the top left corner of a list or a page. Then you would go to customize and select customize the ribbon, and this box will open up. Or whether it's a card, a page, or a list, wherever there's a ribbon, anywhere in that ribbon area, you can right click on it and you have the option to customize the ribbon, and this same box will open up. When that box opens up, this hopefully is not too confusing, but on the right hand side are going to be all the elements that are already on your ribbon. So you can see that there's a high level menu that I highlighted in red here. These correspond and should directly relate to the tabs that you see on the current window that you have open. So then underneath there, you have all of your different groups, and these are the little gray titles that you see here, and I'm actually looking at my home tab now, and then each one of these groups underneath home correspond to the group here. If I were to expand this report item, I would see all of these reports that are listed here. So I can move those around. I can move them to different tabs. There's actually might even be more detail and more available on the left-hand side that I could add to the right-hand side. Or in my particular case, what I'm going to do is I don't use all of these reports, so we're going to step through how to take these off or how to move them around to a different tab, and I'll show a few examples of that. So let's go into NAV. And I am going to go to that same customer list that I had in the example there. So again, I can get to personalizing it by going to customize and customize my ribbon. And I get this box that I had shown here, and then you can see where I can drill down, and then all the reports that are showing here, because I'm on my home tab, I'm on the report menu, so I'm on the home tab in the report area. This all ties together. I am going to remove the statement I use a lot. I'm going to remove this one because I don't use that one a whole lot. I don't really need to see my payment receipts. I'm going to move that, and then you're going to see what happens here too. In the past, there used to be, well, it looks like you can, once you get to, depends upon the number of items that you have on the list here, like under new document. Sometimes you don't have the option to change this to large icon size, and that's going to depend on how many items you have here. So you want to be real careful because if this starts getting too much information on here, you can see some of these icons are small, and when they get too small, you can't readily see the description. So to me, it seems like this isn't that functional. So that's why you might want to start managing some of these things so that you can have, things can be a little bit more visible. So now you can see these are the 3 reports that I use all the time, and they're much more front-facing and a lot more visible. So if I decided that I wanted to add something back or manage it again, actually, let me just go in the other way. I'm going to go to right-click and customize my ribbon here. And on the report tab, the way I can get something, either add something on my home ribbon, I have a couple different options. This is the easier way. So let's say I want to see my customer trial balance. Well, I'm going to select my report option here because this is where I want to remove this report. I'm going to go and select it over here, and then I'm going to add it. And then it's going to add it to where I had originally selected. If I want to move something from a different page altogether, this might not be a good example, but just to show you, if I don't want to or can't find it over here and I know it's on another ribbon, I can just go ahead and move this all the way up. It's a little tedious at first, but it's another way of doing it. And you only have to do it once, because then once you do your little restart, and that time it didn't ask me, and I haven't figured out the logic as to why it asks me sometimes and not others. But then here you can see I moved my cash receipt journal up to this customer group here, and now that I have 4 reports here, they're not all large. So this is where you get to play around with a little bit and decide what's best for you. I'm going to go back to my role center here, and this report area I find really difficult to read, and this for me personally would not be functional. To order better to see it, I'm just going to come in here, and the reason why I want to do this is because I want to, at the end of the presentation, I want to bring back the web client. And we saw the way there was just like this really long list of reports that were there. I'm going to go under report in general, and I'm just going to delete, like almost remove, not delete, remove almost all of these. And then if you can remember, hopefully you will remember what it looked like previously. Now I have a much more manageable report list here, and you'll see that the web client looks a little bit different based on that also. So on my actions on my home screen here, we had talked about that they do call these actions. If I were to navigate, like let's say on close income statement, I don't have that very front facing. I don't do it all the time. I want to make sure I select the option on the left-hand side, but I do want it on my home menu. When we had looked at a list page, when I right-clicked on it, it said I could add it to my navigation pane. Now I'm looking at a task. It's going to tell me that I can add it to my actions on my role center ribbon. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. If I do, so here I didn't get that little restart. If I go to an area where there are some reports, I think like under receivables, there's a lot of reports here. Let's say open customer entries here. It's going to ask me to add it to my reports on my role center ribbon. So depending upon what it is you're going to try to add to your navigation pane, you're going to get different options in that little drop down box. So that's customizing your ribbon. On the card page, this could be made a lot more user-friendly also, and highly assist in streamlining your data entry. And when you're opening up points of data entry like a purchase invoice or a sales invoice, sometimes there can just be so much information here, you're losing some of the real estate that you need to see. This is a customer card, but when we go back into NAV, I'm going to actually use a purchase invoice as an example, because I think that that is an area where specifically, let me see, on our next slide here, we can start getting into managing the importance. And what comes into play here, these different important levels on the field that are exposed on each one of your tabs. If you have a tab that's collapsed, and let me go back to the previous screen, you might have these little, called tidbits or breadcrumbs, whatever you want to call it. If that is considered, if the level of importance on that is considered promoted, those will show up on a collapsed ribbon. If it is shown as additional, you can see here which says show fewer fields. When I say show fewer fields, the one that are tagged as additional, those get hidden. And then when I show more, they get exposed. Also, we have this option to set up fields as quick entry fields. And what that means is I can go down the list of each one of these fields and choose whether I want this to be a quick entry field or not. If I select a field and then I uncheck this box, when I'm on the grid or in that area of the page, when I hit my enter key, if a box does not have quick entry selected, it will skip over that. And the reason why I like to show the purchase invoice is because that is a document where that could be very useful. When we go into the purchase invoice document, I'm also going to talk about the back box area. Back boxes are also areas where you can choose to have them exposed or not, and you can also personalize those as well. And all of your back boxes, if you hover over the top right-hand corner, these options pertain the remove and customize to that back box only. You can remove it. If you only have one fact box on a list or a page, the whole fact box area will go away if you remove that one, or if you customize it. In this particular case, we're looking at one that's sales related. This specific one you'll usually find either on a customer list or a customer invoice or customer card. If you don't use orders, if you don't send out sales orders or shipment receipts, you can come in here and remove all of those fields from here. Again, another area where you can do any personalizations to your fact boxes is you can hit the NAV application menu, go to customize, and then customize the fact boxes. And here you initially see all the fact boxes that are included on the particular list or page that you're on. And then when you select a specific fact box that you want to make changes to, you would customize the part and you would get the same window that you see here. If you're on a page that has several fact boxes and you want that whole entire fact box area to go away, you can just unclick this option here and it will go away. If you want to add it back at some other point in the future, you just come back to your NAV application menu, make sure you check that, and then the fact box area will appear again. So let's look at those types of changes that we just talked about. And I am going to go Shift F12 to get myself back home because I know that I put my purchase invoice list as a shortcut here. I modified my ribbon. I'm going to go into this particular purchase invoice, and then now here we can see show fewer fields or show more fields. There's a lot of them that are hidden. And then you can see here on this collapsed tab, there are some items here that are displaying, and let me just collapse the general tab. And if I hover over it, I have my vendor name, my posting date, and my due date as items that are showing on the collapsed portion of the tab. So while I am in this page, I'm going to go to the NAV application menu in the page, not the one way over here, the one that's actually on this page. I'm going to customize, and I want to customize this page, not the ribbon. I want to customize the page. And then I want to go to the fast tab areas, and you can see here, it's not a coincidence. The list that I see here pertains to all of the tabs that are available here, and I'm going to go specifically into the very first one here, because I think during data entry, let me escape out of here real quick again, because if I'm up here and I hit enter, it goes from my vendor number to my name, and then it goes to my zip, country, contact, then to my document date. When someone's entering an invoice, I likely probably don't need to go to any of these fields here. If I hit enter, I want to go straight to my document date. So that's where that quick entry setting comes into play here. So I'm going to go to my fast tab, general, and customize. Let me open this up a little bit more so we can see a few more of the fields here. So now you can see additional. These are all the ones that are being hidden when I go show fewer fields. So I'm going to just kind of click down a couple of these here and just check the quick entry status, because when I got about here, so this one has quick entry selected. I want to uncheck it because I want to skip over this field. When I'm hitting enter, skip over this field, skip over this field. And maybe when I collapse that tab, if I ever do that, I actually want my contact to show. So I'm going to change that to promoted. If there are any fields in here that you don't use at all, and we never use campaigns, so I might want to remove that. Don't necessarily need to see the job queue. I'm just going to hit OK here, hit OK here. This is a different notification, but it's essentially going to do the quick little restart again. So now when I collapse my tab, now my contact is showing up because I selected that as a promoted item. And then now when I'm on the customer name, if I hit my enter key, it goes directly to my document date. That saves a lot of time during data entry. And then just have quick entry for the fields that are relevant here, so that your user or yourself, you can go only to the fields that you need to manage in the header here. And again, this is a personalization. If you make this change, it's not going to carry over to anyone else's workstation. It's only going to be for you. So let me talk about the fact boxed area, since we're right here too. This is where that little cog is. If I wanted to remove this part altogether, I can remove it. Or here we don't really use orders at all in our environment. So I'm going to go to customize. I'm going to take outstanding orders off and hit OK. And this is telling me, this is a little bit different, but every now and again you might get this little indication that you have to close the page and reopen it to see the change, and that's quite all right. Just follow the instructions, close the page, come back into it to edit it, and then that order fields, it doesn't look like I took it off, so I'm not quite exactly sure. But this particular page, the purchase invoice, the reason why I wanted to show this one is this might be a page that the fact box might not necessarily be helpful. You might want more room just for data entry, depending on how much information you have on the lines. So here you might just want to take your fact box off, all together, that whole entire pane, so that you have more room down here to see the information that you want to put on your lines. If at some point in time you feel like you want to add it back, you just come back up here and add your fact box pane back, and there it is. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it off because I just don't like it here. Yes, I want to exit. So That's how you would go about customizing your page, utilizing, and that's relevant for any page that you would open up, whether it's a customer page, a purchase invoice page. You have the same options available for quick entry, the information that you would see if you collapse the tab. So just to review, when I go into personalize, if I show fewer fields, those are considered additional fields, and the ones that show up here on the tab, those are considered promoted. So I'm going to move this back over, and now we're going to talk about filtering. Filtering is one of my favorite things to show because I think it's an area that sometimes might be a little confusing, or some of the filters, understanding the filters might not be as clear as it can be. So on almost all of your list pages, this white area that you see up here is called a filter pane. And the reason why it's called a filter pane is in the top right. This little search area is called a quick filter. Each one of your lists also have this area where it gives you a title or is descriptive of what you see on the list. And in this picture, you can't really see it, but right to the right-hand side of chart of accounts, there's a little tiny down arrow. Almost all of your list pages will have a little tiny arrow to the right-hand side of what the description is. If you expand that, here's a little bit of a better view. I expanded the list that's underneath here. So here you can better see the arrow, and underneath you'll see the different types of filters. So on just about any page, you have a quick filter, you have an advanced filter, and then you have a filter that's called limit totals. What are the difference between the three of those? The quick filter, the one on the right-hand side, it's meant to be quick. And so a couple features that are specific to that is up until this version, all of the options that you would see on the quick filter are relevant and directly relate to all the columns that would be showing on the page. If you change these columns, the options that are available on the quick filter will be the ones that are shown here and will be shown in the same order. But all of a sudden, debit and credit are showing up on my chart of accounts. This is the first version where I've seen something that doesn't match what's on the chart of accounts. By a quick filter, what that means is there's no case sensitivity to it. It really kind of minimizes or shortens your list based on what you put in here. So I just, for display purposes, I just simply put in the word job because I saw a lot of chart of accounts, a lot of the records in the chart of accounts where the word job was in the name. And it doesn't matter whether it's the first word, the middle word, or even a portion of a word. If I put the word job in, it's going to bring all entries in the name field that contain it. That's basically what it is. It's very similar to a contain filter that you would put if you see filters in other places that have that option. Another way to apply a quick filter is if I'm looking at a chart of accounts. Let's say I want to filter my whole chart of accounts by the balance sheet. I can select on one of the rows in the income statement and balance sheet column. I can select that value, right click on it, and I'll get this little menu here and it'll say filter to this value, and it will automatically apply that filter for me. If I ever want to remove that filter, I can hit the little filter button with the red X and it would just bring back the whole entire list again. But this is another way. Again, it's quick. So if you just right click and filter this value, it's automatically going to fill in the quick filter for you. The advanced filter, one huge difference between the advanced filter and the quick filter is you can't simply, well, first of all, the advanced filter, you have an option to filter in all the records or all the fields on the table, regardless of whether the column is displayed. This might be a little bit hard to read, but at the top, this is the filter pane in the chart of accounts, and I displayed the advanced filter here. It does, in fact, have the similar concept where you can see all the visible columns, but if I go to all, this list on this right-hand side is a list of all the fields. So regardless of whether the field is exposed or not, you can filter on it. Another difference is multiple filters can be applied here. So I can search by a name and by a certain range of accounts at the same time, and many other filters. I don't think there's a limit, but generally maybe 2 or 3 may apply. Here, it doesn't have the same type of contain feature. So if I were to simply type in the word job, and I showed as an example here using an advanced filter where I did the same exact example as I did on the quick filter where I typed in job, I get 0 results. Okay, so in order to get similar results, in this particular case, I did a job and an asterisk. An asterisk is a wildcard, but see, this only shows names that begin with job. If I wanted a similar filter to work, I would, like the quick filter did, I would have to have my syntax be asterisk job asterisk, and it would work just, very similar. And here's an example where I have, all accounts that begin with the Word job, and then it's only my GL accounts and my expense range. They begin with 5. Up here, I have some income and maybe some balance sheet accounts that begin with jobs. So this is just an example of where you can put multiple filters on using the advanced filter. Then there's limit totals. What limit totals do, again, I would have to go to my chart of accounts, hit that little arrow and indicate that I want my limit totals to show up. Limit totals, you are filtering data on the list that you're looking at, but the data is derived from an underlying table. The chart of accounts is the most prevalent one that I would see this used, but if you have balance fields on customer lists, they would also be driven by any date filters that you might put there. So what this is showing is, and I like to also show this too because I find that a lot of people might not necessarily know the difference between these 3 fields. This is kind of like my favorite view whenever I'm looking at the chart of accounts. If I put a date filter in here, my net change column, the values that are going to be here only pertain to this specific date filter. My balance at date is going to be my balance as of the latest date on my filter. So this is my balance as of 2/28/19, which is why I have different information. This is just February, and this basically is year to date through February. And my balance field, that generally will never change regardless of what date filter I have in here. So I might actually be in 2020 in my database, which we're not realistically, but in sample databases, they are out to the year 2020. This balance will just never change. Whatever data is in there, this is what will show up in the balance field. And I have a little bit of description of that here. So that's very helpful, especially when people are doing analysis. And I use these 3 a lot to see the differences and try to find out variances and identify where they are. So specifically on the chart of accounts, I personally spend a lot of time helping clients do analysis, and when I'm doing analysis, trying to identify a problem or find information, I find that I'm putting the same filters on all the time or often, and it can be very tedious and time consuming reapplying filters over and over and over again, especially if they're the same ones. So in NAV, when you're on a list page, after you've specified several filters that you want to add, you have this option. Again, I'm going to go back to my filter pane, go to chart of accounts, and there's an option to save view as. In this particular case, I can't see, this wasn't a good example. I don't know if I have another filter up there, but it appears as if I have my cost of raw materials. So let's say I do, I'm a job cost person and I have to assess or analyze my cost of raw materials at the end of every period or during the course of each month. I want to see and manage my costs, and I want to look at my balance sheet view all the time. So here I have my cost of raw materials and I'm looking at February. I'm going to save my view as, and you can't see it in this example. I couldn't expand this window, but I just put a further description that said cost of raw materials and hit OK, and that's going to be the name of this list and this view, and it's going to save those respective filters. And same here, you're going to get this little refresh window that opens up, and it's going to add a new list basically to your home page. Here I have some other ideas of how to save views. What I use, another ones that I usually use quite often is I'm going to filter my chart of accounts by balance sheet. That's one view I'll save. I'll do a filter on income statement. That's another view, because when I'm doing analysis, it's not uncommon for me to only want to see my balance sheet accounts or only see my income statement accounts. Have date filters for the current period that you're closing. I would imagine that there might be times when you're closing each period and you're constantly putting on that view. Save your view as current month. Then next month, reset the date to the current period, and then you can just save that view again. You don't have to save a completely different one. Another list might be vendors that and this would be from your vendor list where they have a 1099 code, but maybe their federal ID is blank. This would be good for year end, or just a reminder that you have to follow up with some vendors that you need additional information from. Maybe you want to see a list of just your blocked or unblocked vendors. If you're using approvals in the system, maybe you want to see a list of your purchase or sales invoices by status, for example, have new ones where they haven't been sent for approval, some that are pending approval, and ones that are approved and ready for posting. If you're using items, maybe you want to see an item list where they're just set up for bombs, or if you have jobs and are assigned to responsible people, that's a view that you might be able to save. So let's bring Nav back over here and let's look at some of these other ones that we had talked about here. So here's my full chart of accounts, and here is my quick filter, and I'm going to change this to name, and I am going to put jobs. Actually just job, because that's what I had here, and if I did accidentally put jobs, you can see there's only 2 names here that contain that full word, so syntax matters. So I'm going to remove this filter and kind of show where if I put in the word job here, it doesn't give the same results. If I do add that asterisk and accept the filter, oh, that I have to change this name, that matters also. If I just do job, nothing shows up. I just get records where the name begins with job. And then if I put an asterisk before it, I get very similar results to what I did with the quick filter. I just want to display again, so I'm going to select this balance sheet field. There's no quick filter here. If there was a quick filter, it would be replaced. If I selected this balance sheet and filtered to this value, you can see here that it applied it. And then if I scroll all the way down to the bottom, so I can see right here, I have 2 GL accounts that appear to be in my income statement range. And this is a good way when you get to year-end close to kind of do a test to make sure all of your GL accounts are set up correctly. But this view, since this is my filter, now I'm going to go and save view as. And I'm going to call this balance sheet. And I am going to hit OK, get my little favorite restart message. And then now you can see here, since I saved this from my chart of accounts list, I now have this option available here. I'm going to set a similar filter that I had set before. I think it was 5, I think it's 5.3 that I had on there. My cost of raw materials. And like I said, if I do analysis on this on a regular basis, see my date here is the 19th. I'm going to put a date filter. So I want to start getting into a little of in addition to just showing you how the quick filter is used, some shortcuts for entering date filters. So right now my work date is in 2019. So the calendar year begins with January. So that would mean, and I just know this in this test database, most people operate on a calendar year, January being the first period. And this date filter, if I want to get a February date, if I type in P2, it's going to give me the whole month of the year. And this is going to be driven by my work date. If my work date said February 21st of 2020, P2 would be end in 2020. So here you can see the difference between the net change, balance at date, and balance that we were talking about earlier. A couple of other shortcuts, because I am the worst typist in the world, so it is very tedious for me to actually type out this whole entire syntax. If you type in Y, that's going to give you the whole year. If you're at a point in time where we are now, we're kind of close to the beginning of the year. A lot of people are still closing the end of their year. So a common filter that they might be putting in right now is wanting to look back to last year and get a view into last year's data. So a quick way to get that full year syntax for the date filter is Y-1, and then I can get my whole entire year for last year. If I do a Q, that's going to give me a quarter. But oddly, and I don't understand why this is, if I go Q-1, it's not going to work. I always get this error message. If I want to look at the previous quarter, I have to go Q-1Q, and then I can get the previous quarter. So I have in the slide deck also, and when Ulistic puts this up on our website, they might be nice enough to put some of these shortcut keys displayed on the page as well. But I'm going to go back to my first filter called P2, and this is another view I might want to save as my raw materials. And when I put that description there, hit OK, it's going to do my little quick restart. And then if I go here, now just keep in mind, you have to use your imagination. Just, it's not even your imagination, just stuff that you do a lot. If you do analysis on this group of accounts, and this is the filter you're using, it tells me what my filter right is right over here. It's going to save this. But now you advance into subsequent periods, and it's later in the year, and you don't necessarily want to look at February all the time. If you want to look at different periods, I want to expose my limit totals because that's where my date filter is. And so, maybe we're in period 3 now. And for the next 30 days, I want to start looking at the third period. Well, I don't necessarily need to have every single period up here. I just want my view to be changed to look at March until I'm ready to look at April. So now that I've changed that, I can simply save the view. It's not save view as. I'm just updating a current view. And now when I toggle off that view and come back to that view, you can see that my date filter appear to be March. And I can just hide those limits. So that's the concept and idea of how to use your views. And I highly recommend users start investigating that a little bit because I find that kind of underutilized. And I almost always, in almost every single environment where I assist people with looking into things at a minimum, I have my balance sheet and income statement. I mean, maybe there's an indirect range of accounts that you do analysis on, or maybe your cash accounts at the end of every month, something like that. Those are other examples of views that you can have. I'm going to go back to my role center here. And you can see my web page has timed out on me, because I've let it sit there for about the past almost hour. Wow. Talked a lot. So I'm going to refresh this page because it kind of signed me out, and you can see here, this is really kind of very relevant to what we had seen before I had made any changes. If I refresh my web page here, you can see that this list has trimmed down quite a bit because I did go into my report tab and change all of those. And now some of the other items, the purchase invoices that I added and my posted purchase invoices are showing up here. Now, I also want to just spend a little bit of time showing how to navigate around a little bit in the web client. If I go to chart of accounts, because this is what things are moving towards and transpiring to at some point in time, the desktop client is going to go away. And once this evolves to be much more I don't want to say that it's not robust now. It is robust. This has really kind of grown over the past couple of years, but eventually there's going to come a time when this desktop client is not going to be available. But there is no, we can't save views yet. But to get to your filter pane, this is where you would do that here. And this is that same advanced filter, and this is filters totals by and date. You can apply date filters, and you can use the same date shortcuts as we did there. Your search capability is this little light bulb. So if I wanted to go to purchase invoices, again, same concept. It will narrow down lists, and you can select from there. You can see here, this is the same exact purchase invoice list that was shown in NAV before. To show and hide back box panes, I hit this little box here. So there are a lot of similarities, but the look and feel of it definitely is a little bit different, and it's going to be somewhat of a mind shift transitioning to this. If someone does go to the on-prem version, both the desktop and this web client are available. So here is that list that we may be able to get put on our website for the different date shortcuts. And I also have a list here of very common filtering capabilities. Maybe we can get this put on our website too when the webinar is posted, just as a reference for some very common filtering criteria that we use. And that concludes all of what I wanted to show today. Next month, our webinar we're going to feature is Whodunit, and we're going to be talking about how to set up and manage your changelog and how to look at your changelog entries if you need to go back and see who done a transaction, who had done or changed a record or inserted a record. And it's really came in handy. Changelog came in handy. I used it very recently for a use I never would have guessed I would have used it for. Hopefully Max will be talking about that. And then also using and referencing your GeoRegister as an audit trail. Again, my name is Danica. Here is my email address and my phone number. I'll leave this up here for a couple minutes for everybody to see. If anyone has any questions or if they have any webinar topics that you'd like to hear more information about, please let us know. Thank you.